Welcome to Avoidant Decoded, where we explore the hidden emotions, behaviors, and psychology behind avoidant relationships. If you want to understand what happens beneath the silence, distance, and mixed signals, you're in the right place. Before we begin this powerful speech, make sure to join the membership of Avoidant Decoded and become part of our growing community. Now, let's uncover what genuine love can truly awaken inside an avoidant heart. Have you ever cared deeply about someone who seemed to run away from the very connection they secretly wanted? Someone who became distant when things started feeling meaningful, who chose silence whenever emotions became too strong. From the outside, an avoidant person can appear cold or unaffected, but underneath that distance, there may be someone experiencing emotions much more intensely than they know how to express. When an avoidant truly falls in love, something begins to shift beneath the surface. The emotional walls they have spent years building are slowly tested. This transformation is rarely dramatic. More often it happens quietly, through small changes in how they experience vulnerability, closeness, and trust. For many avoidant individuals, control feels like safety. They become accustomed to managing their emotions, depending on themselves, and keeping relationships at a comfortable distance. If their earlier experiences taught them that relying on people could lead to disappointment, rejection, or pain, independence can become their strongest form of protection. They learn to keep their feelings private and avoid becoming too emotionally dependent on anyone. But genuine love introduces something they cannot completely control. Suddenly, they may experience tenderness, longing, attachment, fear of losing someone, and an intense desire for closeness, all while another part of them is telling them to pull away. That inner conflict can become the beginning of real emotional growth. Love does not suddenly erase their fear or transform them overnight. Instead, it places them in situations where their usual defenses no longer feel as effective. They may become confused by their own reactions because the strategies they once used to silence difficult emotions are no longer enough. Slowly, they can begin to realize that controlling everything does not necessarily make them feel safer. Sometimes it simply keeps them alone. This is why their progress may appear almost invisible. They might speak more openly about something personal, reveal a part of themselves they normally hide, return after a difficult conversation instead of disappearing, admit when they made a mistake, or apologize when their old instinct would have been to shut down. These actions may look ordinary to someone else, but for an avoidant, they can represent enormous emotional progress. Every time they choose honesty instead of hiding, they are learning that being vulnerable does not automatically lead to rejection. They are discovering that allowing someone to truly know them is not the same thing as losing their independence. The journey is rarely smooth. An avoidant may become closer, feel overwhelmed, create distance, and then come back again. They may still need space when emotions become intense. They may struggle to explain what is happening inside them. But the important difference is that they are becoming more aware of those feelings instead of automatically running from them. Eventually, they can begin to understand that love is not about maintaining complete control or constantly protecting yourself from emotional pain. Real connection requires allowing another person into places you have spent years keeping guarded. They may never stop feeling nervous about intimacy, but their desire to preserve something meaningful can gradually become stronger than their instinct to escape. That is when avoidance can slowly begin turning into presence. They may communicate more honestly, show affection more openly, ask for reassurance, acknowledge their mistakes, or make an effort to remain connected even when the relationship becomes emotionally uncomfortable. These changes reveal something important. They are no longer focused only on protecting themselves from getting hurt. They are beginning to care about protecting a relationship they genuinely do not want to lose. For someone whose emotional survival has always depended on independence and control, choosing to open their heart requires real courage. Their willingness to be seen, understood, and emotionally known can become one of the clearest signs that the relationship has become deeply meaningful to them. Another major change appears in the way they handle emotional presence. When conversations become serious or feelings become overwhelming, an avoidant may naturally withdraw. Solitude can feel safer than emotional exposure, especially when closeness has historically felt threatening or demanding. Their withdrawal does not automatically mean they do not care. Sometimes it is simply the defense they learned when emotional connection felt unsafe. But genuine love can challenge that defense, especially when they experience someone who offers warmth without pressure, understanding without judgment, and closeness without trying to control them. Over time, they may begin to discover that emotional presence does not always lead to pain. The progress can be slow and inconsistent, but it matters. Instead of disappearing during a difficult conversation, they may stay and listen. Instead of pretending that nothing affects them, they may attempt to explain what they are feeling. They may not find the perfect words, but their actions begin saying something powerful. They care enough to stay. And staying means facing the very fears they once escaped: rejection, emotional exposure, losing control, and the possibility of being hurt. Yet when their feelings become strong enough, they may decide that the discomfort of vulnerability is worth experiencing. Emotional presence also means allowing someone to see what exists behind the controlled exterior. They may start talking about their worries, admitting when they are struggling, sharing uncertainty, or revealing emotions they once would have kept completely hidden. To another person, these moments might seem small. For an avoidant, they can represent profound trust. They are no longer using silence, distance, or independence to hide everything they feel. They are allowing themselves to be known. And that is where genuine connection begins. When an avoidant starts choosing engagement instead of automatically choosing escape, something meaningful has already changed within them. They are learning that closeness does not require them to surrender who they are, and that loving someone does not mean losing their freedom. They are discovering that two people can remain independent while still being emotionally connected, and sometimes that realization becomes the beginning of a completely different kind of love. Being close to someone does not have to mean losing yourself. For an avoidant person, one of the most meaningful changes can happen when they begin realizing that they can be fully known and still be accepted. You may notice this after emotionally intense moments. Perhaps they once needed several days of distance after an argument, but now they return much sooner. Maybe they even choose to stay and work through the discomfort rather than leaving completely. Their old instinct may have been to escape whenever emotions became overwhelming, but slowly they can learn another way to feel secure. Instead of automatically finding comfort in isolation, they begin discovering that healthy connection can also create a sense of calm. This does not mean their fear of intimacy suddenly disappears. Love simply gives them a different experience of safety. They start learning that peace does not always require being alone. Sometimes being understood can be just as comforting as having personal space. Emotional openness can gradually become a source of strength rather than something they need to fear. Little by little, they begin challenging the belief that distance is the only way to survive difficult emotions. And eventually, this new emotional presence starts appearing in ordinary moments, not just during serious conversations. You may see it when they laugh with you, enjoy comfortable silence, show affection, or simply want to share an ordinary part of their day. They might ask how your day went, notice when something seems wrong, or offer comfort when you're struggling. Their empathy may not always come through perfectly or dramatically, but you begin noticing more of it. They are learning how to care deeply while still maintaining emotional balance. Every time they choose to remain connected instead of retreating, they are not only strengthening the relationship, they are also challenging the old emotional patterns that once controlled them. So, when an avoidant person stays emotionally present rather than disappearing, don't dismiss that change as insignificant. It may be their quiet way of showing that the relationship matters. They are learning to experience strong emotions without automatically running from them. They are becoming more capable of holding their own feelings while also making room for yours. That is a profound internal shift, the moment when connection begins to feel safer than solitude. Another important transformation can appear in the way they approach personal space. For many avoidant people, distance can feel like emotional breathing room. Having space gives them a sense of freedom, control, and independence. It allows them to feel that they can handle life without becoming overwhelmed by another person's needs. Their past experiences may have taught them that becoming too close could eventually lead to rejection, disappointment, emotional pain, or the fear of losing themselves. Because of that, depending on someone can feel risky, but genuine love can slowly challenge that belief. When an avoidant person begins moving toward closeness instead of constantly creating distance, it can reveal a major change in how they understand intimacy. At first, even beautiful moments of closeness may trigger their need to pull away. They might enjoy an intimate experience and then suddenly need time alone because the emotional intensity feels like too much. But as trust develops and the relationship begins to feel secure, closeness can become less threatening. They start understanding that being emotionally connected does not mean giving up their identity. They can love someone and still have boundaries. They can share their life while maintaining their independence, personal space, and individuality. This lesson usually develops through repeated experiences. Each time they experience closeness without pressure, they receive another piece of evidence that intimacy does not have to mean losing freedom. Eventually, the desire to connect can become stronger than the instinct to escape. You may notice this through very small behaviors. Someone who once disappeared for days after an emotional conversation may now reach out much earlier. They might initiate contact instead of always waiting for you. They may check on you without needing a particular reason, ask how you're doing, or simply want to spend time together without constantly needing distractions. From the outside, these actions may seem insignificant. Emotionally, they can represent tremendous progress. Each step toward connection challenges an old belief that intimacy is dangerous. Their heart is slowly becoming comfortable with something their mind once treated as a threat. They may also discover that closeness itself can sometimes help them regulate difficult emotions. In the past, creating distance may have been their main way of calming themselves. Whenever emotions became intense, they separated themselves from the situation until they felt back in control. But a healthy relationship can teach them something different. They may begin associating your presence with comfort rather than pressure. They can discover that the right connection does not necessarily trap them. It can actually help them feel grounded. At first, this realization may surprise them. They may wonder why they no longer need as much distance as before. Instead of always craving separation, they may begin noticing that they miss you when you're gone. That can feel incredibly vulnerable. For perhaps the first time, emotional needs they once pushed aside begin making themselves known. They may quietly recognize that being around you makes them feel peaceful, understood, or secure. They are not simply missing your physical presence. They are missing the emotional experience they associate with you, the warmth, understanding, and sense of connection. Eventually, those feelings begin influencing their behavior. Instead of withdrawing every time discomfort appears, they may reach out for reassurance. Rather than hiding what they need, they may begin expressing it. They may never suddenly become extremely emotional or poetic with their words, but their actions can become much louder. A message when they would normally remain silent, a visit when isolation would have been easier, a gentle gesture when their old instinct would have been to pull away. These simple behaviors can reveal something significant. Their desire for connection is beginning to outweigh their fear. When an avoidant person starts seeking closeness instead of constantly protecting their distance, it can show how deeply meaningful the relationship has become. The walls that once kept everyone outside begin to soften. Intimacy is no longer viewed only as a threat to independence. Instead, the relationship can become a place where they feel free enough to be themselves without constantly fearing judgment. And that is when love begins changing their definition of safety. Another powerful transformation can be seen in consistency. Avoidant behavior can sometimes seem confusing because their actions may change from one day to the next. One moment they may be affectionate, engaged, and present, and the next they may seem distant or unavailable. That inconsistency does not automatically mean they lack feelings. Sometimes it reflects an internal conflict between wanting closeness and fearing what closeness might demand from them. Their emotions move toward the relationship, while their protective instincts tell them to step back. But when genuine, healthy love begins creating a stronger sense of security, that instability can gradually settle. Fear becomes less dominant, and their behavior starts reflecting their actual feelings more consistently. They begin showing up because they genuinely want to, not simply because they feel obligated. For someone who has spent years protecting themselves through emotional distance, consistency may initially feel uncomfortable. Reliability requires presence, communication, honesty, and emotional investment. But over time, they can learn something they once struggled to believe. Consistency does not have to mean confinement. It can mean safety. As they become more secure within the relationship, their behavior becomes more dependable. You may notice it in how regularly they communicate, whether they follow through on promises, and whether their actions match what they say. And when their words and behavior begin telling the same story, That can be one of the clearest signs that something meaningful is changing inside them. They begin reaching out when they say they will, following through when they make commitments, and showing through consistent behavior that connection is no longer something they only want from a distance. They show up when they said they would. They keep plans instead of quietly avoiding them, and they follow through on commitments that they might have once ignored when things felt emotionally demanding. This does not mean they suddenly become perfect. It means the part of them that wants connection is becoming stronger than the part that wants to escape. Love begins giving their actions a deeper reason. Slowly, an emotional world once ruled by avoidance can begin finding a healthier balance. For an avoidant person, consistency may become a form of communication. They may struggle to explain everything they feel, but their repeated actions can reveal what their words cannot. Big romantic declarations may feel uncomfortable or overwhelming to them. Sitting down and expressing every emotion in one intense conversation may not come naturally. Instead, they may communicate through steady effort. They stay in contact, remember details you mentioned, make thoughtful gestures, keep their promises, and remain connected when the relationship enters a difficult period. Their old pattern was to escape discomfort. Now they are developing a reason to remain. They begin learning that meaningful love is not sustained by constant excitement or unlimited independence. It grows through trust, patience, reliability, respect, and emotional stability. Building that kind of consistency can be difficult for someone who has spent years avoiding uncomfortable parts of themselves. They may have to confront insecurity, fear of vulnerability, impatience, uncertainty, and the instinct to protect themselves at almost any cost. But when someone becomes genuinely important to them, they may start wanting to outgrow those patterns. They begin thinking about how their choices affect the person they love. Before making certain decisions, they may stop and consider your feelings. Where they once operated almost entirely from self-protection, they begin making room for compromise, consideration, and mutual understanding. Every promise they keep matters. Every difficult conversation they choose not to abandon matters. Every time they stay instead of disappearing sends a message without requiring a dramatic confession. It communicates something simple. This relationship is important enough for me to work through my fear. You may also notice that conflict no longer automatically sends them running. Instead of disappearing for several days after an argument, they may attempt to discuss what happened. If they make a mistake, they may acknowledge it instead of becoming defensive or shutting down. They may even apologize, despite how uncomfortable that might feel. That willingness to accept responsibility reveals a major change. Protecting the relationship is becoming more important than protecting their ego. Love can teach them that accountability does not take away their independence. In fact, taking responsibility can strengthen trust, and trust gives a relationship room to become safer and healthier. Over time, reliability becomes another way they express love. They begin discovering that love is not communicated only through intense emotions or beautiful words. Sometimes, the clearest expression is simply being dependable. They may still experience fear. They may still have moments of uncertainty or emotional overwhelm. But those feelings no longer have to dictate every decision they make. Increasingly, they choose respect, care, responsibility, communication, and presence. The person who once avoided intimacy begins creating intimacy through repeated actions, through showing up, through keeping promises, through staying engaged, through demonstrating again and again that they are genuinely there. That is where authentic love becomes visible, not when fear completely disappears, but when fear stops controlling every choice. Another profound change happens when an avoidant person becomes willing to let someone see who they really are. For years, they may have protected themselves behind independence, humor, emotional control, silence, or the appearance that nothing truly affects them. Their insecurities, fears, emotional needs, and softer parts may remain hidden behind a carefully maintained wall. Being deeply seen can feel threatening because it gives another person access to places they have always considered vulnerable. They may have learned early that revealing too much could result in rejection, criticism, embarrassment, or emotional pain. So emotional protection becomes almost automatic. They build an internal fortress and convince themselves that needing no one is safer than trusting someone. But genuine love can slowly weaken that fortress. The desire to connect begins becoming stronger than the desire to hide. At first, the signs may be very subtle. Maybe they open up after an argument instead of shutting down completely. Perhaps they tell you something personal about their past. Maybe they reveal an emotion they normally keep hidden. These moments may appear small to someone watching from the outside, but for someone who has spent years protecting their inner world, they can be enormous steps. They are beginning to understand that being loved requires allowing themselves to be known, not just the polished version they show everyone else, but the person underneath the defenses. As trust grows, they may begin sharing things they once kept completely private. They could talk about their insecurities, fears, difficult memories, childhood experiences, or past relationships that shaped how they approach emotional closeness. They are not necessarily asking you to fix them or rescue them. They are trusting you with pieces of their story they once believed were too dangerous to reveal. That trust communicates something powerful. They believe you can see their vulnerable side without using it against them. And as that belief becomes stronger, their emotional walls begin to loosen. You may notice it during difficult conversations. Someone who once avoided emotional subjects may now be willing to start one. Someone who previously relied on sarcasm, logic, humor, or distraction to escape uncomfortable feelings may begin sitting with those emotions instead. They may admit that something hurt them. They may acknowledge jealousy. They may even tell you that the possibility of losing you scares them. For an avoidant person, those admissions can require tremendous courage. Every time they speak honestly about something they once denied or suppressed, they move farther beyond the emotional territory that once felt safe. In doing so, they are giving you access to a part of themselves and trusting you to handle it with care. That kind of trust can be one of the strongest expressions of genuine love. Being truly seen also means allowing imperfections to become visible. They may stop working so hard to appear unaffected. You begin seeing their real laughter, frustration, uncertainty, disappointment, tenderness, and confusion. They no longer feel the same need to perform strength or pretend that everything is fine. Around you, they may simply become more honest. For someone who has spent years surviving behind emotional walls, that authenticity can feel surprisingly freeing. They are no longer focused entirely on maintaining an image of being strong, independent, or unaffected. They are choosing to be real, even when being real feels uncomfortable. Of course, this does not mean they suddenly become completely open or emotionally expressive. There may still be moments when they need space. They may still struggle to explain what is happening inside them. Genuine love does not transform an avoidant by forcing their walls to disappear. It transforms them by giving them a reason to lower those walls, one choice at a time. When they stay through discomfort, communicate instead of disappearing, and allow themselves to be truly seen, their actions begin revealing what words may struggle to express. The greatest sign of change is not that fear vanishes, but that love becomes strong enough to move them beyond it. And when an avoidant finally chooses connection over escape, you are witnessing more than affection. You are witnessing a heart learning that it is finally safe to love.